Hello and welcome to another podcast from Sports Insight, where today we are joined by special guest Andrew Goodfellow, who is a player and the senior admin at the Durham County Presidents American football team. So the idea of bringing you in today, Andrew, was on the back of the article that we wrote about yourselves in terms of the club's financial issues, and you basically wanted to follow up on this and talk to us today. So thank you very much for coming in today.
Yeah, it's no problem at all.
So just tell me what exactly you want to talk about today, and just give us a gist of basically why you came and joined us.
So the main thing that us at the Presidents are conscious of is that with the article, it's been absolutely fantastic for getting our name out, and we just want to sort of put a few people's minds at ease, really. Because it talks about the finances and the issues of, and it was a general opinion of those finances and how difficult it can be. It doesn't necessarily mean to say that
Everything's gone completely
wrong.
wrong.
Absolutely. It's not that we're struggling or anything like that. It's more that we're powering on. So that's the whole reason behind the follow up, really. So,
Brilliant. So obviously we've talked in the article. We spoke about the financial issues, and it hasn't quite been the smoothest ride for those 35 years that DC have existed, has it?
No, absolutely not. There was back in the old days, back in the 80s, where American football was big at that time as well. There used to be televised games of UK games, and so obviously it's a bit different now, where we are getting game footage and various teams have got great setups, like Northumberland Vikings have got their Vikings TV which they've set up, but it's not exactly UK televised games anymore. So in terms of getting the name out and growing as a club, finances are one of the primary factors that we need to make sure that we're using our resources correctly. So that's the way that it goes with that.
Yeah, and you talk about, obviously, the Northumberland Vikings have their own TV footage. They basically do it all themselves.
Yeah.
So with Sky Sports, obviously, introducing, quite a heavily lot of coverage towards the NFL, do you think that, Sky Sports or other organisations that associate with sports ought to think about, grassroots, well, not necessarily grassroots American football, but American football in this country, rather than, putting it entirely on the NFL? Because the NFL is massive in the UK. It's one of the biggest growing sports in the country, with loads of people turning into the Super Bowl. And, not a lot of people actually know that the sport exists in this country. So do you think if an organisation like that came in and tried to get involved just a little bit, that, it could allow yourselves to continue and, basically have more of a smoother ride?
Absolutely. It would, in my belief, you'd be able to tie in your NFL stuff in the UK with news of UK teams, and it would really help, even if it was at the start of the NFL season or at the end, if there was just a bit of a shout out to say, these are the teams in your area, look on this website further, and that would be massive for the growth of the sport, because there's plenty of people around who have absolutely no idea that American football is a thing in the UK. I work quite locally, and in my work, I was chatting to someone and I say that I play American football, and they're like, "Oh wow, it's not really big, that is it?" I let them know that there is 3 different university teams in the area and 4 different senior league teams as well, plus the amount of youth sports, which is fantastic in the growth. Even with Senators, with their alliance with the Jacksonville Jaguars, which is absolutely fantastic for the growth of the game in the UK. But in terms of getting a bit of coverage out there for the UK, it would be hugely beneficial if there was even mentions or directing people in the right places. At the moment, we sort of do all of our own media coverage, primarily through social media. And so social media is one platform. However, thousands, millions, lots of people watch the NFL throughout the year, and just getting that little bit of a shout out there for teams around the country would be massive.
Yeah.
So,
Well, just moving away from all that kind of stuff, we'll talk more about yourself. What was it that actually, you know, that you yourself got into American football? So what was it that you basically, was it watching it back in the 80s and 90s, or was it just something that you thought to yourself, you know what, I just want to give this a go? And just before you say there, I'm not calling you old. That's why I did say the 90s. So
yeah. Well, I was born in the 90s, so it wasn't a big thing for me. I'm a bit of an outlier in terms of American football and the sport. When I was at university, I just felt like I wanted something new. I didn't really know what that was. I was in my final year, and everything that I was doing in the previous years was just getting a bit stale. And I had someone who I worked with at university when I had a job there myself, and they kept mentioning that I'd be great for playing American football, especially in a lineman position.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess it was just things ticked over in my head. I thought, well, I can go and try out for rugby, because I wanted a contact sport. I wanted something where, I don't know, it was just completely different to what I was used to, because my background previous was outdoor adventure, doing kayaking and canoeing and rock climbing. And so, the guy who I worked with was like, you should come along, you should come and play. I had no idea about the sport. I had no idea how to play. I hadn't even watched a game before or played Madden. And it was an eye-opener, but I didn't need to know any of the things prior to coming down. I didn't need to have an idea, because I was pointed in the right direction from the word go.
Yeah.
And that's what teams around the country aim to do, even if you've not had an input, or you don't really know what you're doing, or you don't understand the rules that much. The teams, the coaches, the players on the team, they all help to direct you. So we have players who've come from rugby backgrounds, who've come from all over, and you pick it up as you go along. I found out very quickly when I started playing that as long as I did my job, then I didn't need to worry about what everyone else was doing, as long as they did their job. And it was fantastic, because I could just get on with it, and I really enjoyed it. And that was 6 years ago now, so I've been playing ever since. And going from not knowing anything to now, hopefully by next year or the year after, looking to go to Team GB trials.
Yeah.
It's a massive difference from start to finish, and American football is definitely my life now. So, yeah.
So, yeah, there, Andrew, you talk about your Team GB trials there. Again, is that something that, you know, you'd love to accomplish, playing for Team GB, and, you know, because essentially that's the highest level that you could get. So is that something that you'd love to achieve as well as the DC Presidents?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started DC pretty much as soon after as I finished uni. I left uni, went straight to a training session. You didn't have to wait for an open day or a rookie day. You could just go along and turn up, and the coaches put you in straight away. With my university background of playing for a whole season, I actually had 2 training sessions, and then the head coach put me straight into the starting team, and which was phenomenal at the time, especially as back back 5 years ago, DC was a really big team. It was the biggest in the Northeast. It's now over time, as times have changed, and we're now a developing team, which is absolutely fine. And it was actually my old head coach who sort of planted the seed, really. I was just playing because I enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And he pulled me to one side, one training session, and he said to me, bearing in mind I was 21 at the time, and a few years have passed since then, but he said to me, would you like to be trained up for Team GB? And I didn't really know what to say at the time. I was a bit shocked. And yeah, it's taken a few years to get there, but that was from what happened with the club, which is a different story and too long to say. But it's definitely planted the seed, and as my fitness has increased over the years, as my knowledge of the sport has increased. It's something which has always been there and is now my goal. If I don't make the squad, okay. But the main thing is I want to at least get to the trials and be at that top level of the game in the UK. And then see where it takes me after that.
Yeah, well, you can only imagine what it must mean to yourself. But just imagine this, that you make the actual British team. Imagine what that would do for Durham, essentially. So
Absolutely.
Not only would that shine a light on the club, knowing that a Team GB athlete plays for Durham County.
Yeah, absolutely.
That could also give more players the chance to think to themselves, right, I'm going to carry on playing for this club, and also be a great advertisement for more people to get involved with the club.
Yeah, absolutely. The obviously our hopes is that DC builds up and up and up. The whole goals of me trying to go Team GB is so they're for my own reasons. They are for me to increase in my own development. If that has a knock-on effect for the club, then that's fantastic. If it has a knock-on effect for just the sport around the region, then I'm happy with that as well.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily have to be with us, it can be other places. As long as people are getting involved, then that is the main priority. And then if I was successful and then I'm learning from some of the best in the UK, to be able to share that knowledge as well is a phenomenal thing, and I would try and do that around the university teams in the region, as they are our development, really.
Yeah.
Natural progression for university players is to then find senior teams, and so really what I'm aiming for is to get to the high level, learn from some of the best, and then share that knowledge as well, as it's all about the growth of the game. It is a lot bigger than people realise.
Yeah.
But to actually get the word out would be amazing.
Well, when you actually think about it, because there was a video promotion I did for something, and even though there's hundreds and hundreds of like football teams, as in normal football, in the actual like university and senior football, there's more teams than there are like actual professional football teams out there.
Yeah.
So that's one of the reasons why I think the sport deserves to become more noticed and more popular in terms of like grassroots level.
Yeah. And
that's just something personally that I think, like what we talked about with Sky Sports or any other. I'm not saying that Sky Sports should, just focus on it predominantly, but some organisation should come and get more involved, because, like you say, you want the publicity to just not just focus on yourselves, but football around the country.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so just to elaborate on that, like what would you want to see come from that, basically?
So at the moment, it can be quite difficult for emerging teams to progress, and really it's down to the overall structure of things. Everyone around the country will have their own ideas, their own opinions of how American football in the UK could be better. There's no right or wrong answer, and it's really just a thing of ensuring that people are coming in and staying in, and they have the right motivation to do so. Back to the article which we did, one of the big things for people personally is their own finances, as a lot of teams around the UK, especially emerging teams, we finance ourselves near enough. There are the odd sponsorship deals available. There's much wider scope down south. I would say it's just my opinion. I can't obviously say for certain. But in terms of players personally, the whole idea of buying their own equipment, bearing in mind one of the cheapest helmets on the market at the moment in the UK, so is around about £150.
Yeah, which isn't like
It's
not pocket change, is it?
Yeah, exactly. It's
and
not
that's not for like the premium like quality that the leagues and that sort of cut down, and you get the safest equipment, which can cost up to like £300-400 for like a good standard, can't it? So.
Yeah, absolutely. So with playing the sport for a long time, I bought my first pieces of equipment when I finished university, and I used my student loan. As I was still a student back then, I had that little bit extra disposable income, which obviously I do have to pay back. Everyone does.
Yeah.
And I used that to buy my kit, so I was quite lucky in that sense. But a starter pack, which gets all of your basic needs and wants, can be around about £250. And that was just a start. And since I've bought a new helmet, which it looks the business, but the helmet alone was $350. And so the prices of these equipment, especially because it's American import, is pretty damn high.
Yeah.
And so the finance side of things can be an issue for people personally. We do what we can to ensure that people have the best possible experience. We have various pieces of equipment that we can lend out to people who are just starting. It would be great if we had that little bit of extra finances to be able to have more.
Yeah.
If we could kit up every person on the team, that would be phenomenal. We would people would just have to turn up with boots, gum shield, and clothes to get dirty.
Well, I think that also rolls into why people don't like to get involved, because of the costs.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of the time people expect clubs and organisations to fund them to be able to play it, and I think that's not just with yourselves. Obviously, that goes across the whole country. Cause,
absolutely.
Like, you look at some of the companies that sell. There's very limited companies. I know Football America and EP Sports are like the big ones.
Yeah.
But other than that, it's like the biggest market for like equipment is buying it second hand. Now I know when I started playing American football, my pads, who I still use now, were second hand, and they've been absolutely fine.
Yeah.
But even though they're second hand and still been used, they still weren't quite cheap.
Yeah.
But that's like the biggest. That would, if you agree, would be the biggest incentive for someone who's just wanted to get into American football, is to buy it for second hand. Is that something you'd agree with?
Yeah, absolutely. The cost difference is dramatic, buying first hand, second hand, and so again, social media is a massive help for that. There are buy swaps pages that are just focused on American football gear, and I know for a fact that a large amount of players in DC have got their own equipment from there. You always wonder that little bit of the quality of them, and you know that if it comes from a organisation such as Football America or EP Sports, you know that you're getting top grade equipment, and if there's any issues, then you can send it back, get new, and you're fine, you're sorted. But with just the sheer cost of it, the cheapest way is second-hand gear, and you get what you see, really. Luckily, with the social media side of things, you do get pictures that are sent up, and so you can have a little bit of a look. As sometimes it could be quite rare for people in the region to be selling equipment. At the very least, selling them that's at the same colours as your team. For example, Northumberland Vikings, they have black helmets and DC are white, so it can be quite a difference to be able to change the colour of those. So it's whatever comes up, really, and you see what you get, really. So second hand does definitely seem to be the way that a lot of people are going. It would be great if there was if we were able to facilitate people hiring equipment from us for the year at a hugely reduced cost, or even just borrowing it for the year. We would be quite happy with that.
Yeah.
That would all depend on what the management team suggests. So yeah.
Yeah. So we'll move away from finances.
Yeah.
We'll talk more about getting people involved. Now, when I came down to one of the training sessions, I think it was a couple of weeks ago now, there obviously wasn't the big like amount of numbers that you'd want to see from a club, but there was no lack of motivation, and there was definitely not a lack of effort. Like there was a guy there that came down who'd never been involved with the sport before, and he showed a fantastic effort for his first go at it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that must be something that you look at and think, yeah, this is what I want to be a part of, because it's not just about playing the sport; it's having that team spirit. And for me personally, I'd say that DC has a high level of it.
Yeah, the something that we even though we lack in size, something that we make up for that is that team spirit.
Mm-hmm.
We have a very friendly family feel, and the day which you came along, it was raining that day. Various members on the team have other commitments, including family and work, which is the life as you get older, as you move away from university and into the real world, as it's called. And yeah, so the reason why people keep coming back is because of that family feel, and we've asked various players on the team, some long-standing, some brand new, why they stick around, and because sometimes we wonder ourselves, and it's definitely that they want the club to grow, they want to work alongside their teammates, because we've become friends over the training sessions. We have a laugh with each other. There's banter that goes around during training, after training, throughout the week, and the young lad who you mentioned who had just come down the same day that you had, he's now bought his own kit. He's registered to the team, and he is very much invested himself into DC, and he's absolutely loving it. He's wanting to grow himself, and then he's having a laugh as he goes along. Yeah. And yes, there are serious aspects of an American football team. We have to make sure that we learn to the best of our abilities. But what I'm trying to say with DC is we have that serious side, but we're also there to support each other. Yeah. And in whatever support people need, we'll help to the best of our ability, and that's why DC has been a home for various people around.
And I think that's the most important part of not just American football, but any sporting team, having that team spirit. I think most people would rather join a team where, there's no disrespect to DC, but where you compromise having the best team you could possibly join for. Yeah. But joining a team that you enjoy playing for week in, week out. Yeah. And sacrificing that little bit of like quality to compromise for having actual quality experience playing for the team. Yeah. And like you say about this young lad who came to that training session, there's obviously been something that's made him want to come back and join for someone that's never played the sport before. Yeah. So having that incentive of making sure that everyone's like friendly and happy to let players learn the game, again, is something that you must look at and think, yeah, this is why I'm proud to be part of this club, because we can bring in new players and we can show them our team spirit and let them engage with it, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. So the current team at the moment, it's saying a bit more about myself again. In terms of players, I am the second oldest player, not in age, but in terms of experience at DC. I've been there for the second longest.
So you've had the longest playing career, basically.
Mark Quinn, who's the head coach, he has been there since the early days.
Yeah, he loves his football, doesn't he, Quinn?
Absolutely. And anyone who knows him will be very much happy to be around him. He is a likeable guy and a great, friendly head coach. in terms of my ability level, like I said, my old head coach asked if I wanted to go Team GB level, and there are other teams around the region who are in Premier Division, who would be able to give me that stepping stone that I needed in terms of giving me that push to move on, and that's all well and good. That's great, and especially for the ones who've reached out and said, "Would you like to come along?" I thank them for that. It's nice to hear. But there's a reason I stay at DC. It's you very much get a sense of loyalty when you're in that smaller environment, that grassroots sort of game.
Yeah.
And the amount of friends that I've made along the way is phenomenal. And yes, everyone has good days and bad days, and every team will know that as well. But in terms of being able to play and do what I enjoy, although I could get that fast track to where I would like to be, I wouldn't enjoy it as much as if I went in my own direction the way that I wanted to. And that is with a club who has been a part of my life for a long time and will be forevermore.
Yeah. Well, when I spoke to a couple of other lads, I know Phil, he absolutely loves his football as well. He's a bit of a nutcase in terms of when it comes to like actually seeing him on the playing field.
Absolutely, he's very passionate.
But I was speaking to him when I came down to the session, and he says he's been to other teams before, and he said nothing felt quite right other than being at DC, because like you say, it has that feeling of, you know, bringing in new people. And I know some American football teams not necessarily do it on purpose, but forget that team spirit of, you know, bringing in new players and, you know, trying to develop players to the best they can be, rather than this, you know, this pick and choose method where they'll come down for one session. So, for example, 3 people might come down, and rather than saying, right, these 3 people can all join and we'll try and develop them, they'll be like the pick and choose system where, right, he's really good for this one player, we'll allow him into the team, but these other 2 players we're not really bothered about, so we'll sack them off, that kind of thing. And I think that's another reason why people don't want to get involved. And I think that also goes in, again, I keep saying this, but also falls into the category of more sports. But how important do you think it is to, you know, to bring in players and just develop them to be as best as they can possibly be?
We are so we try and be as inclusive as we possibly can be. We are well aware of teams around the UK who have their athletes, and that's the general term that we use in terms of the people who, you know, can perform week in, week out. Now, that's fantastic, but if you're going to grow something, if you're going to try and make the sport as big as you like, you've got to be willing to push people who want to be there, just as much as everybody else. And we have people of all different size, ability, strength. It doesn't matter who you are. We will do what we can to improve you, and everyone gets some form of game time. As long as they are willing to put in the effort themselves. That's the main thing for us. If people are willing to put in the effort, then we will do everything we can for them too. Unfortunately, it's not the same for all teams. Some teams, you'll have people who turn up to training week in, week out, and when it comes to game time, the athletes who've been away for 5 out of 10 training sessions will get starting spots because they know, the coaches know that they can perform. And like I say, we do our best to try and include everyone. We do our best to be fair, and that is the main thing, and that's one reason why lots of people stick with us. we have had people who've come from other teams before and have said that, well, I've been there and I've not got any game time. And it is what people want at the end of the day. I know for a fact that if I'd been training week in, week out, and we went along to an American football game, which, as you know yourself, can last for around about 3 hours.
Yeah.
If you're still on the sideline for 3 hours, that is not what you want to out of the sport that you've been in, that you've invested yourself in.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, in terms of getting people involved, getting people doing what they love, we try and do that to the best of our ability, and we hope that everywhere else would be the same. We understand that. Again, it's not necessarily the general consensus with higher level teams.
Mm-hmm.
You want to win, fantastic. Winning also increases media coverage. It increases the sort of the position of people. Oh yeah, I want to go to that team because they're doing great things in the sport. But yeah, we do what we can to provide that platform for the people who maybe aren't as sure. And we have people who stick with us regardless of size, stature. And it's fantastic to see these people progress from not knowing anything in terms of the sport to progressing into people who can then be team captains, who can be people who you can rely on. You know that regardless of how they've been at training, regardless of how they've been throughout the general week, you can rely on that person to want to be there.
Yeah.
And so we know that pushing people in the right direction is definitely the way forward. And like I say, we try and be as inclusive as possible. We want everyone to be involved and to have that game day feel, because it's the best feeling in the world.
Yeah, but this is another thing as well. Do you talk about teams having athletes? DC does have some really quality players. Not to blow your own trumpet, but you're obviously one of the good players I put up there. But the likes of Sando, Philip, Phil as well, and obviously I know Quinny's retired from football, but he was one of the, I'd say, looking at the way he played, he was very old school.
Yeah.
But it was a good thing in a way if you wanted to watch him, because the physicality, then the actual aggressiveness that Quinny had put into himself. Because obviously Quinny's not the biggest bloke.
No,
but
absolutely
it didn't matter, did it? Because
no.
Quinny could see someone who's 8 foot and still fancy his chances.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. Like, your team has some like really good athletes on there, and I think that's another reason why DC deserves more in the spotlight, because of some of the players that you have in the team. Yeah,
these athletes that have come about in DC have all been developmental. So Daniel Sanderson, or Sando as we all know and love him, he came from rugby. He had no idea about the rules of American football, just an interest in it, and we've developed him into a top class running back, and he loves the sport. He loves the team, and he very much enjoys being there, and as such, because of his sheer determination to improve himself and to be the big I am, because that is one of Sando's things. He loves to be the big man. That his efforts, along with the other players who you've mentioned, his efforts have gained him a team captain spot, and people do look to him on the day to provide that sort of the big game feel, the big plays that then push the team on and motivate them to go further. And so each of these athletes that DC has is all developmental. I would say that we are a very physical team. In terms of finesse, sometimes there's a bit lacking, but we work hard. We just as the team on the management side of things, we work hard there. We definitely have that work ethic to put in that hard work and that physicality. And there's been many occasions over the past couple of years where we've turned up to different teams and we have had less players than them, and yet we've still come out on top. One prime example was we went to play Burnley Tornadoes away. Burnley is another developing team, but over in the northwest. And we turned up. We had not the bare minimum, but we had enough to sub people out, which was great. But their team was bigger. Once it got to the third and fourth quarters, the times where it really matters, DC kept powering through, and it was that effort which we put in at training, and the effort which we put into ourselves to make ourselves fitter, stronger, which was what pushed us through.
Yeah.
And so yes, we do have the athletes who are around, and teams who players know exactly who they are, but each of these athletes has been a developing player, and so anyone who wishes to join and come down can be just the same as them.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So just to round this basically off, so you can get home and do whatever you
no
need to
worries
do.
at all.
Just give me some aspirations for DC in the near future. So where you basically want to see the club go to.
For those who know that we're around still, we are trying to get ourselves into the National League. It's not the easiest of challenges, and there's many obstructions along the way, some of which we wish weren't obstructions and could easily be resolved with that bit of a helping hand from BAFA, which is the British American Football Association. Our goal is to get back into the National League. We were there. We were a huge team about 5 years ago, and we don't necessarily want to get back to this massive team that we once had.
Yeah.
It would be amazing if we could, but we just want to be there, and we want to keep the name going. The name Presidents has been around for an awfully long time, of 35 plus years, and we want to keep the Presidents going.
Yeah.
We want it to be a name that is recognised around the Northeast for positive reasons, and we'll do what we can to do that. At the same time, the main goal, regardless of how well we do, is to increase the interest in the sport around the region. So we've seen players come, we've seen players go, and those players who go might move on to other teams around us, and we welcome that. That's fine. We're not there to hinder anybody. We're not there to stop anybody from doing anything that they want. We will do what we can to improve everyone and develop everyone. And so if someone thinks that that's to go elsewhere, that's their choice. But we know that essentially with being a developing team in the Northeast, that then we have one of the greatest platforms to develop other people, especially those who maybe don't know as much about the sport as others. Maybe those who think, actually, I maybe might not be as good as these athletes over here. It doesn't matter. We will do what we can to improve you and to improve the sport in the region, and that's it for us, really.
Yeah.
That's DC through and through. Our motto is we do this together, and that stands by through thick and thin.
Yeah. Well, thanks a lot for coming down today, Andrew. It's been
problem at
nice
all.
talking to you about everything.
Fantastic.
So, yeah.
Thank you for inviting me down.
Yeah, no problems.